All right, good morning and good afternoon to everyone that has joined us, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining our webinar for today. Our webinar is going to be the new GUI enhancements for Nebula Control Center. So before we get started, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. What you can do is if you have a question, you can put your question in the chat window, and then we'll get to I will get to the questions at the end of the webinar. So please hold, we'll get to the questions at the very end. So you can actually just type them in, and then I will answer them at the very end of our webinar. So let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Marcus Holmes. I am the sales engineer for Zyxel North America. I have been with the company for a little over 16 years now, starting off in tech support and then moving over to the sales engineering side. So I've been here for quite a while, and I've seen a lot of changes within the company, and I'm very, very excited for these changes that are coming to Nebula. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the new GUI enhancements for Nebula Control Center. So a little bit of the table of contents of the things that we'll be covering today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our new trial service that is available. And then we're going to look at the tree menu reorganization, the new site widgets that are available, client list filter by manufacturer, and the private SYSLOG. Okay, so starting off our new trial service. So we do have a new product in the pipeline called our SCR. It's a router, it's a Wi-Fi router for the home that can be used within Nebula. So we do have a Pro Pack trial for this particular security router. The security router, it's like a 3-in-1 with the Pro Pack, which includes web filtering, ransomware protection, and then Nebula Pro Pack. So in order to activate the trial, if you happen to get one of the SCRs, you would just go into the license and inventory section and enable the trial. And the trial is good for up to 30 days. That gives you the availability and the availability to use these services so you can try them out on a 30-day trial basis. So that's one of the new things that we've added as a new trial service on Nebula, and that's going to be the SCR router. Now, moving on, let's look at the menu tree reorganization. Now, I'm sure many of you may have noticed over the past week, we have updated Nebula to a new version, and this new version has reordered the tree menu within Nebula. So let's take a look at why we've done this. So our engineers took a look at our menu tree and took some user feedback over the years, and we found that there's been a poor user experience from our customers. A lot of the time, some people have found that it to be a little bit complicated, and it's a less intuitive versus our application, so our app. So we do have our Nebula app, and on the Nebula app, some people have found that it has been a little bit less intuitive versus the app that we have. And then also, there are some that have said that it's been a bit outdated versus the app too. So these are some of our motivations for changing the GUI structure within Nebula. So let's take a look at some of these changes. So on the left-hand side, you'll see how the menu tree was organized before. We have the MSP, our group-wide settings, organization settings, site-wide, and then our help option. And these were all located on the left. So what we've done is we've kind of moved things around and kind of unified them. So now if we look here, we see our site-wide section, everything that was a submenu within the site-wide has now been moved to the forefront on the dashboard. So now all of your site-wide settings are front and center, and you can actually see them on the left. All of our organization-wide settings have been placed beneath that. So anytime you need to do license and inventory or add administrators, you no longer have to click through the site-wide menu or the organization-wide menu just to get to that section. You can see it in the very front on the left-hand side. Next, we have our group-wide setting. We put that in its own little menu. So there is a sub-menu here. So it's group-wide managed for the group-wide settings for all of your groups. And then finally, here we have our MSP menu. So the MSP is at the very bottom, whereas before it was at the very top. And there's a very good reason for that, which I'll get into in just a moment. And then also our help menu has now been moved up to the top. So instead of being at the far bottom, you now have it along the top with your other icons here on the top right-hand side. So let's take a look at the sub menu as well. So on the left-hand side, anytime you needed to monitor or make a configuration change to any of your devices, whether it be a mobile router, firewall, a switch, or an access point, you had to click on those particular menus in order to bring up the submenu for the monitoring and the configuration. So what we've done now is we've moved things around to be a little bit more intuitive. So for instance, our monitor now, there's a section under there that just says monitor. And when you click on the monitor, it brings up your devices. You have your access points, your switches, your firewall, your site feature logs, and your containment list. So all of your monitoring is going to be in one section under submenus for each individual category devices that you have. Additionally, you'll see under devices, we can actually see our access point, switches, firewall, and mobile router. And there's an enhancement to this as well, which I will cover in just a moment as well. And then finally, our configuration. If you click on the configuration, it now brings up the configuration for all of your devices under one menu. So now we have our Wi-Fi SSID access points. So if you click on access points for configure, it will bring up all the settings for your access points, your radio settings, your security service, and APN port settings. So you see that we've now changed the submenus around to be a little bit more intuitive and grouped together. So you're not doing multiple clicks to get to specific sections for configuration or monitoring. Now let's talk about the improvements to the user experience. So when I talked about the order of where things were, this is basically our engineers taking a look at the most frequently used items from top to bottom to the least used items as well. So our frequently used items are going to be your dashboard, your topology, your devices, your floor plan, so on and so forth. And that's why these are at the very top, because we found that these are frequently used by most of our users. Sometimes things that are sometimes used by our users are going to be your organization-wide settings, so your license and inventory, administrators, organization-wide settings, and then finally things that are almost never used by your average users are going to be your group-wide settings and your MSP settings. Now, we do have users that are MSPs, but the ratio of people that are using the MSPs to our average users is so low that these things usually never get used by your average user. Okay? So moving along, let's take a look at some more settings here. So in the improvements to the user experience, we've pulled the more popular frequently visited pages to the base of the tree for visibility. So under dashboard, we can now see we have our dashboard at the very top, topology. So this was often hidden under a couple of different main menu layers, but now we have it at the front so you can automatically view your topology and then view your clients, because these are often visited by a lot of our clients, a lot of our users to manage the network, specifically the topology setting. And then underneath here, we have our organization-wide. We put the license and the license management here under organization-wide here as well. So therefore, your license and inventory is just a click away to bring you to your license and inventory page. And then your administrator, this is where you're going to add or remove admins. Okay. The next thing we want to take a look at is our or some enhancements into the menu tree itself. So on the left-hand side, you'll see that we've actually added a scroll bar so that you can scroll. So if you have a browser that has been minimized, you have the ability to scroll through the menu on the left-hand side. Or if you're using a device that has a very, very low resolution and your browser gets shrunk, we've now added a scroll bar so that way you can scroll the menu on the left-hand side. Additionally, one of the things we've also added is under the devices section, you'll see that there is a plus sign, and this plus sign will allow you to add devices. So instead of going to license and inventory and then adding your devices from there, you can now add it directly from the front side of the GUI on the menu on the left. So if you want to quickly add a device, you just come over to devices and then click the plus button to add a device, and it will go through the process of requesting the serial number and the MAC address of that device to add it to your inventory. Another enhancement that we've done is we've put in some options to hide or show sections within the submenus to help with decluttering. So that way, instead of having the menu keep expanding out or opening up, we can then hide items that we are currently not using or not interested in. So if you want to configure the firewall, we click on the firewall and then it will bring down its submenu. And when you're finished, you can hide that submenu to make everything look less cluttered. Now, more improvements to the user experience. We've unified the SSID setup into one menu. So this is going to be unified across all of our devices that have Wi-Fi. So that means our security routers and our access points, you can set up your Wi-Fi settings from one menu under the Wi-Fi SSID. So prior to that, anytime that you needed to configure an SSID for a Wi-Fi device, such as like a mobile router or the SCR, the upcoming SCR, or any of our Flex models or ATP models that had Wi-Fi, you would have to go into its own menu. You would have to go into the firewall menu, and then you'd have to change the SSID settings. But now we've unified them all into one spot so that all devices can be configured that have SSIDs in one specific spot. Some more changes too as well. Previously, if you were using the voucher or the voucher settings to create vouchers for your access points, previously you had to go to site-wide, monitor, and vouchers. Now we've moved that around because now it's under monitor, access points, and vouchers. So we've made this change based on the menu structure to get to the point where you would like to add vouchers to your AP. Now let's talk about some new site-wide widgets. So before the update, anytime you wanted to add or modify any of your widgets, everything was just kind of grouped, or it was ungripped. Everything was just laid out in front of you. They have the different types of widgets that you can make visible or hide. But now what we've done is we've taken all of those widgets and we've grouped them together. So now we have our site network, our clients, our mobile router, security firewall, switch, and access points. And within those categories, you can choose which things you would like to make visible on the main menu as a widget. Now, some of the things that we've done as well is we've created a default widget template, and it's going to be based on what devices are currently present if you've ran through the organization wizard. So if you're a new Nebula user and you're creating a new Nebula organization, you end up running through the Nebula organization wizard, which creates your organization, your sites, and adds your devices. So based on what devices you add during that initialization wizard, we'll then add specific widgets to the dashboard. So for example, let's just say that you went through the organization wizard and you did not include a security router. It will provide the regular basic firewall widgets. However, if you've created an organization that includes a security router, it then looks at the fact that you're adding a security router, and then it will add security router widgets. And what I mean by that is you're looking at your threat status, your threat management, threats detected, your security router network applications, and your security router clients by OS. So we're trying to be a little bit more intuitive in the back end to provide you with widgets that are going to be based off of what devices you have currently added into your Nebula device when using the organization wizard. Now, some other widgets that we've done at a glance is we also added a change to how these things are shown on the main page. So we have our mobile router, which is going to be our LTE outdoor router. Then we have our firewall, our switches, our access points, and our clients. But what you'll end up seeing is now we've made some changes to how this is displayed. So if you have a green circle around that particular icon, that means that the device is online. If it is a gray circle, that means it is offline. We've also added, of course, we've always had this option that shows you the amount of devices you have and which ones are online. So for instance, if we look at the switch status, we have 3 switches that are in this particular site. However, only one of them is online. We've also we're showing what the statuses of those particular devices are. Under the client section, we can see how many clients we have that are wireless and how many are wired. So we have a brief overview of our individual devices and what they're doing. Additionally, some of the things that we've done was we made some changes to some of the widgets. So prior to the last update, when you look at the wireless clients by manufacturer, you got this little pie graph or circular graph that just broke down everything in terms of sections. So we have our dark green is Amazon, our medium green is unspecified, so on and so forth. The problem is we don't have any numbers as to what these are. Now in Nebula 17, phase 17, we can now see exactly the total number of clients by manufacturers that we see, and then we can then break it down by numerical value. So we can see how many were unspecified, how many are Apple, how many are Intel, so on and so forth. So this will show this information if you're connected to a firewall, security router, or AP. The client counters have been added to the screen so you can now visually see exactly the amount of clients that are connected. We've done the same thing to wireless clients by OS. Again, before this last update, you just had a simple graph that showed you a breakdown, but no numerical value. But now we've added that as well. So for some reason, the slide didn't show this on here, but it will show up. Now, other widgets that we have is we have wireless clients by usage, and then we also have wireless clients. So now we have all of this that's been unified. If you're using, no matter if you're using an access point or our SDR router, everything has been unified together to show this information in its widgets. Now let's talk about the SDR or the security router, the SDR, for just a moment. If you do have an SDR, it will show a specific router widget for the SDR. We're going to see the WAN IP address. We'll be able to see the connectivity, and then we'll see if the firmware is up to date. We'll also be able to see the security router clients by OS, and then we'll be able to see the ransomware information based off of that SDR router. So some more security router widgets, you'll be able to see your threat management protection. So if you are using the trial, once the trial expires, you can then click on it to upgrade to have the license up to a year. And then again, we'll be able to see the threat detected by clients. We can see in this example, we have 381 hits of threats that have been detected by the clients. And then we can also see how much ransomware has been blocked. So these are specific to your security router widgets. So here's a better breakdown here. We can see 381 hits, and then it breaks down those individual hits based off of category. So we can get a visual representation of exactly what the threat protection is doing on the SCR. And again, additionally, similar to our ATP and our Flex with the application control, it automatically will scan for applications in the network, and you'll be able to see a breakdown of all the applications or the top 10 applications that are being used on your network. Okay, now another thing that we've done is content list filter by manufacturer. So content list filter by manufacturer, we can learn information from AP switch and the security plans about specific products. We can easily identify and block clients based on hardware not approved by the company. So what this means is when you go into your client section, we can then see what the manufacturer is, and then we can break down and expand the list out. And then therefore we can see there's an option for now manufacturer. So this is a new setting that we've added into Nebula Control Center, because normally we could see information as to the IP address, when it was last seen, any type of policy and status, but now we've added a manufacturer option. So therefore, if you are using using our firewall, you can set up rules to block specifically by hardware that has been approved or not approved by the company. Now, finally, the last thing I want to talk about is the private SYSLOG local timestamp. And this is an enhancement that we have brought into Nebula Control Center. So prior to the update, the way that the SYSLOG server local timestamp works is if you were to log into any of our devices within Nebula and you do the show clock time command, it will show you that all of our local timestamps are based off of the GMT timestamp. So basically, we're using the Universal Coordinated Time or Greenwich Mean Time. So anytime any local SysLogs are done, it's stored with the timestamp of the UTC-0. So that means that anytime you do any type of local logs or you want to send it to a SysLog server, it's going to have UTC-0 as its timestamp. However, on the front end, in Nebula side, on Nebula Control Center, when you set your local time zone, it's only going to display your local time zone on the GUI. However, on the back end, if you're doing any type of system logs, whether internal or external, it's always going to have UTC 0 as its timestamp, and it does not adjust for whatever time zone you set in the GUI, because the GUI is only going to show you the modified time zone settings. So if you were to look at that, if you were to do a private SYSLOG server and send all of your logs to a private SYSLOG, all of the timestamps are going to be set to UTC 0. No matter what you have set in the GUI for your actual local time zone, the timestamp will always read UTC 0. However, now with the new phase of Nebula, we've now provided a mechanism to synchronize the SYSLOG messages and the SYSLOG time zone setting to be that and match what you have set in the GUI. So even though the local device clock will still use UTC 0, when you start doing SYSLOGs and you do an external or internal, it will then look at the GUI settings in Nebula Control Center and then adjust the time zone settings in your SYSLOG to match what you have set in the GUI. And it's only for specific APs. Right now, this is not supported for switch or security appliance models as of yet. But anytime you do any SYSLOGs with our access points, it's supported on these particular access points for the proper SYSLOG time zone setting. So in order to set your SYSLOG time zone setting, you would go to Site-wide, Configure, Site Settings, and then under the Site Settings and Reporting, you will see that there's an option for Use Time Zone for SYSLOG Server Logs. If you enable this, then it will take whatever SYSLOG or time zone setting and will apply it to your SYSLOGs both internally and externally. So you can verify this by, after turning that option on, you can log back into your device and then run the option for SYSLOG, and then you can run these commands to exactly see what your SYSLOG time zone settings are. And then that's going to conclude today's webinar. I'm going to go ahead and open up the questions here. So we're going to go ahead and answer some of them, and we've got quite a few, it looks like. So the first question was, does the changes affect any settings on the back end? So I'm guessing this means the changes to the GUI. No, the only thing that really gets modified really is going to be the changes to the SYSLOG server. All of the other menus that have been changed around will not affect any of your configurations on your devices. Okay. All right, another question is going to be on one of the slides you mentioned the SCR. What is the SCR router? All right, yes. So the SCR is our new security router. It's like a home-based router. It's very small. It's not your full-fledged firewall like we have, like our UTM firewall, but it's kind of a consumer home business, small business router that has Wi-Fi capabilities, and then it also has your threat protection and application filtering as a service. So that is a licensed service that you would add to the device. But it is like a smaller router. It's not like your big ATP 500 or Flex 500. It's just a smaller router for your home office or your home residential or small businesses. Let's see. How do you expand the left bar to show more than just the icons? Okay, yeah, I've seen that actually pop up before. It may be dependent on your screen resolution and it defaults to that. But what I can do is I can look into that and then provide more clarification on that. So if you want to, the person that asked me that, please just send me an email, marcush@zyxel.com, and then I can, we'll start a conversation and we'll try to figure out what's going on with that. Another option, is there an option to show the icons and names on the left navigation window instead of seeing them? Yeah, pretty much the same thing as the previous person that asked. We'll look into that. Again, just send me an email and we'll start a thread conversation about that, and we'll get that answer for you as quickly as possible. Okay, so I'll go ahead and leave the chat for questions open for another 2 or 3 minutes if anybody else wants to ask a question or any more questions in regards to the GUI enhancements. And again, if you have a question, just hit the Q&A option. Don't hit the chat because we have chat disabled. So please just use the Q&A section to ask your questions, and it'll pop in and we'll be able to answer it. Here's another good question. Is there a planned option for more advanced settings in the Wi-Fi section when using the mobile app? I do believe that that is going to be something that will be added in the future. I think the original idea behind the mobile app was to make it as simplistic as possible. So they didn't want to clutter up the app menus, but that is something that I do believe that they are going to add here in the near future. All right, looks like we have another question. Is there going to be a way to do rolling upgrades on the Wi-Fi apps? I don't believe that there is, there's no option yet, but I don't believe it's in a pipeline, but that's something that we can inquire about. All right, we'll leave the questions open until 11:30 a.m. Pacific, so about 2 more minutes. Again, if you have a question that you would like answered, please use the Q&A icon in the Zoom application to ask your question, as the chat has been disabled. Okay, good question. Is the SCR router available now? No, but it will be rolling out here within the next couple of weeks. So you can ask your sales rep and see about possibly, inquiring about it. But I don't have a specific release date. But I do know that we do have some in stock at our offices. It's just that we have not released them yet. All right, so it is 11:30. If there's not any more questions, we're going to go ahead and conclude this webinar. Again, thank you very much for joining us. There's one more question that popped in. Oh, that was a thank you. Okay, no, thank you. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you guys joining us. We look forward to all the future enhancements that will be coming in Nebula as well. And then I'll try to get those questions answered for you. Just please, again, email me at Marcus, Marcus, like Henry, at Zyxel.com, and then we can get a conversation rolling and we'll get those answers for those questions. So again, thank you for joining the webinar. We'll see you again on another webinar. Thank you very much.